Good afternoon. My name is Truth Paradox, and I would like to talk about something. The unconstitutional house arrest of the sovereign peoples of the world, justified under the pretense of health and safety, which doesn't make any logical sense at all. And I'm pretty sure this video is gonna be taken down by YouTube, and I don't give a fuck, you know. I'm gonna stand my right. I'm gonna stand what I believe in, based on facts, based on what I know, and not just because like fear-mongering mass media is peddling, you know, every day, constantly, 24/7. But now I'm just, taking a stroll, enjoying the sunny afternoon, peace, quiet, and freedom. But the funny thing is, deep inside, I'm not peaceful. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm happy. I'm healthy. I have no complaints. But what affects me deep inside is the reaction of like at least 90% of the population regarding this, pandemic. And, I don't blame them. They're not well informed. They're not educated about the medical science. And they just believe what the mainstream media, throws at the table. So I don't blame them. But the fact that at least 90% of the population are affected, and that means I am indirectly affected by their reaction. So it's just like saying I'm going forward, but 90% of people are going backward. So that means I cannot go forward because of them. You cannot move forward, you cannot progress because they are going backwards. So that's kind of like, a paradox. So I'm not affected by what, mainstream media is spouting, but what I am affected is the reaction of at least 90% of the people. And now, as I've said, I don't blame them. They just need to be educated. They just need to know the truth that all of this no, the thing is, I'm kind of still like having second thoughts of using such words, but I'm gonna use them anyway. This is a big hoax. Yes, in my research, in my belief, and in connecting the dots, yes, there is a virus, but the virus is not that deadly. Just think of like a seasonal flu virus, that's it, But the only reason that people are fearful about it, it's because it's novel, it's new. Just like saying when the new iPhone comes out, everybody gets excited, like they just want to like throw away their money for the latest, newest iPhone, and they wouldn't care less for the past iPhones because it's new. Like this is human nature. We are always drawn to something new. Could be a new car, a new iPhone, like just something new. And even with bad news like this, we still get attracted to it in a negative way, So what I'm saying is people have the propensity to talk about anything that's new. As I've said, it could be a new phone, a new house, a new car, like a new event, whatever. And now this is like the best global example. A new virus, a novel virus. And just because it's fucking new, people are like fucking talking about it every day, 24/7 in forums, social media. But the ironic thing is they're not allowed, or I think they don't talk about it in public because of the fear of censorship, or like contradicting the narrative of what the WHO and CDC and all of these other 3-letter acronym organizations saying that their word is absolute and you should not contradict them, which is kind of funny. You know what? Contradiction is not saying that you don't believe them, but it's just that you're just being critical of the situation. You don't buy into what they say. You actually have second thoughts, and you do your best to research and cross-reference other sources and not just believe whatever WHO or CDC says. Which, by the way, these organizations they're just a fucking front. They're being used by multi-millionaires, billionaires for their agenda. Well, World Health Organization doesn't really care about your health, and CDC doesn't control diseases. Actually, they're the ones who hand out the disease in society. And as I've said, if this video gets censored, I don't fucking care. So I'll do my best to be somewhat informative in this video. I'm not the end all be all for this information, but what I can say is I'm not dumb. I can read. I know how to connect the dots. And just so you know, I am a licensed medical laboratory technologist from the Philippines. Although I would like to admit I haven't practiced for years. I haven't practiced being a medical lab technologist for years. But that doesn't mean, I don't know what's happening, in this whatever, pandemic you call, because I have studied this for 4 years in the Philippines. I know the theory behind, virology and microbiology and human health. Pretty much we've studied that for 4 years, so I'm not dumb. So it doesn't mean I haven't practiced the profession for years, that I've forgotten about all the foundations. So I'm just gonna specify one thing: the COVID-19 testing. The COVID-19 testing, it's all over the news. It's in the televisions, it's in social media. People saying, oh, 22 positive in my workplace. 15 additional positive cases in just one day. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so let's approach this in a logical sense. Okay, so let's just say somebody got positive. So what? So what? Doesn't mean they're positive. It doesn't mean that people should get scared of it. Most of these are symptomatic, which, by the way, for most people that's scarier, because that means asymptomatic means that they carry the alleged virus but they don't show signs and symptoms. So pretty much they're carriers of the virus. And you know what? As I've said, for the 90% of the people out there, I don't blame them. I don't blame you for being fearful for your lives, because you're not well informed. So going back, so COVID-19 testing, the positives that you hear in the news: 22 positive, 30 positive, 100 positive in just one day, blah blah blah. So what does that mean? So it means that these patients, these people, have their throat swabbed by a medical professional and have the throat swab, tested for, the said COVID-19 virus. Okay, so that's just it's very simple to understand, right? So a medical professional takes a patient's throat swab and uses that throat swab as a specimen and tests it in the COVID-19 testing kits. And you either wait if the machine says positive or negative, right? So it makes sense, if you're positive, then you're positive for the virus, and if you're negative for the virus. Pretty simple, right? It is. But the funny thing is, most, if not all, mainstream media, social media, just almost every social media out there, news media, they don't explain the principle behind the COVID-19 testing. So, they spout these COVID-19 positives, negatives, they always spout these COVID-19 testing without even explaining to the masses what is the principle behind the testing. So pretty much, just to make this short and sweet, the COVID-19 testing uses what we call the RT-PCR. And for the other viewers out there, I think you might have possibly encountered this acronym if you're like a researcher. It's RT-PCR, so that means reverse transcriptase polymerase chain reaction. And I know that's a mouthful to swallow, but that's what it means. It's very scientific, it's pretty long, it sounds cool, reverse transcriptase polymerase chain reaction, and I'm even having a hard time to say all the words. So what does that mean? So in a nutshell, this is the test that's being used to detect a certain type of pathogen. So it doesn't like PCR, like this RT-PCR test, or we will just call the COVID-19 test for this matter, tests for the possibility of the existence of the virus, i.e. COVID-19 virus. So the only thing is, mainstream media does not elaborate on how this process works, because that's the thing, they don't want you to know. They don't want to get into the details, so people won't have a clue on how people are getting tested of the virus. So RT-PCR, going back, so a medical professional uses your throat swab or a patient's throat swab and uses that throat swab as a specimen, to find out if that patient is positive or negative of the virus. But the funny thing is, RT-PCR is very, very imperfect. And why do I say that? As much as I don't want to go into the details, in the technical aspect of the RT-PCR test, I'm not a teacher, but I will do my best to explain how the principle works. So RT-PCR. So there are three main steps for the PCR. First, it's the DNA denaturation. The second step is annealing or primer hybridization. And the third step is DNA elongation. And I know, these sound technical and very scientific, and I don't expect people to easily grasp, but I'll do my best. So I'm gonna recap. So the three steps for the PCR test is, first, DNA denaturation. Number two is annealing or primer hybridization. And the three is DNA elongation. Now, we will just focus on step two, which is primer hybridization, or what we call annealing. So there are certain chemicals or reagents that the test has to use in order for the test to work, or at least function, according to the manual of the machine, according to the principle. So it needs certain chemicals, certain reagents to work. So pretty much, obviously, the number one ingredient is the specimen, and in this case we call it the throat swab. So the throat swab is obviously something that you get from a patient, pretty easy. And ingredients number 2 would be the primers, which is the most important ingredient in this test that I'm going to explain. So primers, pretty much primers, how would I explain it in a simple definition? So primers would be those I would say chemical structures. So once you run the test, these chemical structures bind to like the DNA of the certain pathogen that you want to detect. So for this instance, we are using primers that are, well, according to WHO and CDC, would be specific for the COVID-19 DNA, or for this instance RNA. So just to correct myself, COVID-19, or I would just say like coronavirus in general, these are RNA viruses. So we are looking for coronavirus RNA, not DNA. So, but anyways, what I'm saying is like, so going back, primers are the ones that the test needs to detect for the presence of RNA for this instance, because we are talking about COVID-19, which is like under coronavirus family. So, and we get like a bunch more chemical ingredients like DNA, RNA polymerase, and a bunch of like other reagents that is needed for the PCR test. So I'm not gonna dwell into the details too much. Let's just focus on the primer. So just a recap, what is an RNA primer, or what is a primer? So a primer is a chemical structure or chemical, like a chemical that is being used with the PCR test, along with the patient's specimen, which is the throat swab. And this primer pretty much is needed to detect the COVID-19 RNA. Now, this is the juicy part. The RT-PCR test is very non-specific. It has a high rate of false positive, which I will explain later. And number 3, the RT-PCR test is so sensitive. It is so sensitive to the point that any contamination will most likely yield a positive result. And this is what you see in the mainstream media. 20 plus people get positive for the COVID-19 test. Like more than 90% of like a population is positive for the COVID-19 testing. It's because from the very start, the COVID-19 testing was already contaminated. I mean, imagine a medical professional takes a patient's throat swab. So pretty much, think of it as like the saliva. So pretty much the medical professional is taking out the saliva from the throat of a patient. But what people don't know is this throat swab is not just saliva. It's gonna be like a bunch more of like microscopic, elements like epithelial tissue, which is like the cells, like the tissue that lines your throat. Viruses, and I'm just not talking about like the coronavirus, like a bunch more like the normal flora. We call it the normal flora of the body, like the good viruses, the good bacteria. I mean, I wouldn't really call them good, because once you're immunocompromised, they could still like turn against you. But what I'm saying is these are like normal virus, normal flora that you find in your body. So pretty much we can just call them good microorganisms that help you defend your body. It's like, that throat swab is like a mixture of everything. Saliva, coronavirus, normal bacterial flora, skin tissue, phlegm, blood, and all of these elements, these can cause a high rate of false positive in the test. Because as I've said, RT-PCR, the test itself, is very, very, very highly sensitive, to the point that if the specimen itself is contaminated, which is obviously even from the start of collection is contaminated, is gonna yield, a high rate of false positive. And that's not good, because that's not a reliable way to find out if you really have the virus or not. Okay, let's just assume, worst case scenario, you have the virus. But we're not so sure if that's the case, because you have a lot of contamination from the start. So think about that. And what else? So I did say high rate of false positive. Remember when I said primer hybridization? That is the step 2 of the RT-PCR test, the COVID-19 testing. So step number 2, primer hybridization. So just a recap, and I know I'm repeating myself, but this is to make you understand, and hopefully I am doing my best to explain this. So primer hybridization, so as I've talked about, primer are chemical substances, chemically engineered substances that are used to detect for the presence of a certain RNA or DNA. So for this instance, we are looking for an RNA virus, or RNA, just to be specific. And this primer is designed, according to CDC and WHO, this primer, or these primers, because there's just not one primer, they actually add up a lot of primers that they state are specific for the COVID-19 RNA. So that's the thing, the fact that they're the ones who designed it, we are never even sure that it works or not. So going back, RNA primers, so these primers would bind to the said RNA virus, and that is the principle behind of it yielding a positive or negative result. So pretty much, if you have the virus, then it means that the primer has binded to that RNA, so it means you're positive. And if you test for negative, that means the primer has not found the RNA target, which is, for this instance, the coronavirus RNA strain, or sorry, the coronavirus RNA. But as I've said, it's not very, so long story short, the test is very non-specific. So it means that the primer can bind to anything. It could bind to the RNA of the COVID-19. It could bind to RNA of other viruses present in your throat. It could bind to RNA of your cells. It could bind to RNA to almost anything that was contaminating the specimen from the start. And I know, I haven't explained this the best, but I hope you get the gist that the test was just the test is a failure itself. I'm not saying RT-PCR is not a good test. Actually, in fact, it's PCR, RT-PCR, polymerase chain reaction, reverse transcriptase polymerase chain reaction, these are tests being used worldwide, don't get me wrong, but it's not as perfect as it seems. And even Kary Mullis, who in fact invented PCR even said, and I don't have a quote, but you can research this on your own. Long story short, what he was saying when he invented the test was this was not a perfect test. It comes with challenges still, and it's not like the I wouldn't say it's not the gold standard, but the fact that as I've said, the primers, remember the primers? These can bind to like any RNA virus, not just corona RNA virus, like a bunch of like normal flora RNA. And I'm talking about the RT-PCR, okay? Because RT-PCR, what differentiates RT-PCR from PCR is PCR detects for the DNA, but RT-PCR, reverse transcriptase polymerase chain reaction, detects for the RNA. So as I've said, since a coronavirus, the COVID-19 virus is an RNA virus, and pretty much coronaviruses are RNA virus. That's why they use the RT-PCR, because coronaviruses don't have a DNA. So that's just the main difference. PCR detects for the DNA, and RT-PCR detects for the RNA. So the fact that it's not non-specific, RT-PCR test is very non-specific. It has a high yield of false positives. And the fact from the specimen collection itself, contamination causes even a higher rate of false positives. And let me ask you one thing. Do you think a single patient gets tested a lot of times for this RT-PCR? No. Because it's costly, So let's just say, get this. Imagine a situation. So you're a patient, let's just say you're a patient, showing the signs and symptoms of the, COVID-19 virus. You go to your local hospital, your local laboratory, and you say, hey, I am having like coughs, fever, blah, blah, blah. So I want to get tested if I'm positive. Hopefully I'm negative of the COVID-19. So obviously, a medical laboratory technician, collects a throat swab specimen from you and uses that throat swab, puts them in like a little tube, and this little tube has all the, as I've said, the primers, all the ingredients needed for the RT-PCR test. And, obviously they mix it, they kind of make a solution, like a concentrated solution of like your specimen, your throat swab specimen, and the ingredients needed for the RT-PCR test. And now they put this vial in that machine. So anyways, then you wait for the result. Result comes up. You're negative. Let's just say, best case scenario, you're negative. Would that make sense? No. So what does a negative mean? So negative means that the primer, which is, as I've said, an ingredient in the test that detects for that RNA target, in which in this case we are targeting the COVID-19 RNA virus, and you come up negative. So you ask like, oh, I'm negative, so that's good. So okay, let's just say you're statistic number 1, you're negative. Then patient 2 comes along, he is asymptomatic, doesn't show any signs and symptoms, is not even feverish, he's not feverish, he's very healthy, and he just thought, what, just for fun, I'm just gonna go to the local laboratory and have myself tested for the COVID-19. So medical lab technician gets his specimen, the throat swab, and they test his specimen, and he waits for the result, and result comes out positive, and he's like, what the fuck? I am asymptomatic. I am fucking healthy. I'm not even feverish, you know. I've been healthy since like 5 years ago. And why am I fucking positive? So that's the thing. Those are things that occur in the laboratory that they don't tell, you know. Asymptomatic people can be, you know, fucking positive, and sick people could be like negative. But for the most part, they only get tested once. Because why? They wouldn't spend 2 or 3 tests on one patient because that's gonna cost them. You know, they'd rather have it 1:1 ratio. One test kit for one patient, that's it. And if they want to test the precision of the test, they wouldn't even do it. Like, let's just say theoretically, they would test one patient 10 times. Chances are it could be like a 7 out of 10 positive, it could be like a 4 out of 10 negative, and that doesn't make sense because the test itself is flawed. The RT-PCR, the detection of RNA, the detection of RNA, it's non-specific. High yield for false positive, and that's not reliable, you know. And what I'm saying is, so what am I saying? The fact that the machine says positive doesn't mean anything. And you know what? Even the fact that the machine says negative doesn't mean anything, because the fact that the machine or the COVID-19 testing is unreliable because of its non-specificity, which means it is very non-specific. As I've said, it can bind to any RNA present in your throat swab. And number 2, the fact that, you know, so I did say it's non-specific. High rate of false positive, that's the second one. So the fact that that is a fact makes it unreliable. So, and we're just talking about RT-PCR, okay? I am not bashing PCR, because PCR, which I did say that PCR detects for the DNA, it is very, very specific. But if you test for RNA, and this is not what science has explained to you in social media and mainstream media, RNA detection, RT-PCR test, is a hit or miss. That's it, you know. And if you want, you know, I can show you like articles, like scientific journals that actually say that RT-PCR is non-specific. So, as I've said, non-specificity means nothing. If the test says positive or negative, it doesn't mean shit. Because the fact that it's non-specific, as I've said, it can bind, like the primers can bind to any RNA, and that could mean positive, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it binded to, you know, the COVID-19 RNA virus. As I've said, it could just be binded to, like, you know, a normal flora virus, bacteria, cells, you know. As I've said, you know, contamination itself of the specimen, the test was bound to fail from the start. So you know what, I am not challenging you guys, you know. I just want to inform you guys. And sure, you know, as I've said, I might not have explained this the best way possible, and this is just the theoretical side of the test. But you know, if you want information, send me your email. I can send you like the journals, and you can read it for yourself, like the scientific journals about RT-PCR tests, that they are very, very non-specific, you know, high rate for false positive, and most especially if you have a contaminated specimen, which is obviously a throat swab is a best example of a contaminated specimen, because the fact that they just rub, you know, your insides with, like, you know, cotton buds, and I'm just calling them cotton buds, but those are sterile cotton buds. So the fact that, you know, they can contain like a lot of stuff like epithelial tissue, normal flora, like a variety of viruses aside from the coronavirus, you know, and you could just be positive for not the correct reasons, you know. You could be positive for the wrong reasons, that's what I'm saying. So positivity or negativity of the COVID-19 testing doesn't mean anything. And you know what? I'm pretty sure people will judge me like, well, you know what? Like, what about this and that? You know, I think you're being insensitive to the people who actually died of. Hey, you know what? That could be in another talk. That could be in another video. But right now, I'm just sharing my knowledge, albeit, you know, as I've said, I might not have explained it in the best way possible, but what I'm saying is the information is lacking to most people. Because, you know, mass media, mass mainstream media, social media, they don't give you all the details. And they will not intend to give you all the details. Because that's part of the plan. They just want you to focus on the positive, you know, like 22 positive for, not like the real positive, okay? What I'm saying is like they want you to focus on like the people who got positive for the test. They're not even saying like, well, you know, you would ask them, well, how many people got negative for the test? That's like a question that we need to raise, you know? Like mainstream media could be spouting like, oh, like 50 people got positive for the COVID-19 testing just one day. Now, can we have like, you know, I have a question. Like mainstream media, I have a question. How many people tested negative for one day? Heck, it could be 200. Heck, it could be 300 people tested negative. They're not giving out the right statistic. So let's just say 50 people got positive and 300 people got negative. So that's like 1:6 ratio. So pretty much one person, and this is just a theoretical example, okay? Pretty much like one person is positive against 6 people who are negative for the test. So it doesn't fucking make sense, you know? Like they don't give out all the valid statistic. They only spout data about people who got positive. They don't even say how many people tested negative. Because why? They are fear mongers. They peddle fear and hysteria and paranoia to just every people out there, you know. And funny thing is most people, not all, not me, not you guys, but most people will buy this shit, you know, just because like mainstream media outlets said that 50 people got positive for the test. You know, they will fucking believe that, you know. As they say, you know, tell a lie big enough and keep on repeating it, people will come to believe it. And that's the funny part, you know, like people are easily manipulated by this. Just a fucking data, you know. And it's not even complete data. So anyways, guys, you know, I'm pretty sure this was like a long video, you know. I'm sorry if I might not have explained things well. If you want, you can email me so I can like explain it better in words. I mean, in written words. But that's my stand, you know. Like, the test doesn't mean shit because it's non-specific. High rate of false positives, and even higher rate of false positives if you've got a contaminated specimen. The test was bound to fail from the start. Anyways, thank you for watching, guys, and you know what? I encourage you guys to research, you know, just keep an open mind. You know, protect your mind and spirit and body as well from all this manipulation. And I will see you guys. Truth Paradox signing out.